So guys, we've done the Championship, now it's time to do the Premier League. Let's go. Guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. If you watched my Premier League prediction video from last year, you'll know that I had some absolute howlers in terms of my predictions. So this time round, I'm going to have to try and go one better and at least get some of these right. If you do go on to enjoy though, make sure to leave a like. If we get 400 likes on today's video, that would be massively appreciated. As well as giving you guys my Premier League predictions for the season, we are also going to be running a Premier League Fantasy Football League. I'll leave the league code in the description down below. But as you can see on screen now, this is the team that I'm currently rocking with for the start of the season. We've also got a Patreon exclusive one going on over on the Patreon as well, so do check that out. But without any further ado, let's hop into these predictions. So starting out at the bottom of the table, and it is probably the obvious pick at the moment, but I have gone for Norwich City. Now, I don't want Norwich to be relegated. As someone who makes videos on the Championship, the last thing that I want is these yo-yo teams who are going to be constantly bouncing between the Premier League and the Championship, because at the end of the day, it gets a little bit boring. You know, I want Norwich to solidify themselves as a Premier League club. Last time Norwich were at this level, we saw them make some mistakes, which I'm hoping that they will have learnt from, but I still see some gaps in that squad at the moment. One of the real issues that Norwich had last time they were in the Premier League was being overrun in midfield and having a bit of a lack of physicality in the area. Everyone at the moment is talking about the departure of Emi Buendia, and rightly so. From an attacking output sense, that's an absolutely massive loss. I know they brought in Rashica to sort of cover that so far, but Buendia was, you know, close to impossible for Norwich to go ahead and directly replace in this window, but they've done their best to go ahead and do that. But from a midfield aspect, they've lost Tete and Ollie Skip now from last season, who was absolutely massive in that team. Unless they bring in sort of a competent defensive midfielder who is more than good enough to cut it at Premier League level, they could be overrun in midfield again, which is a little bit of an issue. I like a few other of the additions that they made so far. Obviously, Josh Sargent's come in to try and sort of ease the burden on Timu Pukki from scoring all the goals for them next season. Angus Gunn's come back to the club to add a bit more depth in the goalkeeper department as well. Lees Malou's come in as a midfielder. But compared to what they'll be up against this season in the Premier League, I'm just not sure they'll quite cut it. 19th place and also being relegated at the first time of asking. I then have Watford. I don't want to do this. I want these Championship clubs to survive and once again establish themselves in the Premier League, but I think it's going to be really tough. Comparing their squads to the already established Premier League sides who they're going to be up against this season and battling it out for relegation, Norwich and Watford at the moment, I'm not sure I can see them doing it. If we look into the recruitment that Watford have made so far, they have added a fair few bodies to this squad so far, but I still feel like they're in need of more to really go on and improve this starting 11. You know, they brought in the likes of Ashley Fletcher, Danny Rose, Josh King, Peter Etebo's come on loan from Stoke. Imran Laws has come in from the French League as well, but Xisco is still really quite an inexperienced manager. I think he's only been in charge of 38 career matches. He gave Watford a brilliant bounce last season after coming off the back of what was a quite sort of uninspiring tenure from Vladimir Ivic, but I'd be surprised if he lasts the whole season really, up in this higher division now. The one thing that Watford have to lean on is the players in the squad who have sort of been at this level before, you know, and that has to count for something. But pound for pound at the moment, I see the two clubs who got automatic promotion from the Championship last season, that's probably the two weakest in the Premier League at the moment. And as my final relegation pick, I've gone for Southampton, which might be a bit more of a wild card pick. You know, I didn't want to be boring and just go for those three newly promoted clubs to all be going down at the first time of asking, although I do see that as a possibility. I wanted to throw at least someone in there this season, and Southampton are a team who I am a little bit fearful for this season. A lot of people are talking about the Danny Ings departure, and rightly so. If you looked at Southampton's form towards the end of last season, it really was quite worrying. From the 5th of January up until the end of the season, Southampton only won 4 league matches, and 2 of those wins were against sides who were ultimately relegated. If that similar trend continues going into this next season, then Southampton really could find themselves in a bit of a dogfight for relegation. Now, they are expected to complete a deal for Adam Armstrong. Myself as a Championship fan and everyone that watches this channel will know just how good he is, but Southampton fans know how long it can take a striker to adapt from the Championship to the Premier League. You know, Shay Adams, he didn't, you know, immediately immediately hit the ground running. It took him a little bit of an adaptation period. And so while Armstrong's still settling in, I feel like there's going to be that reliance on Cherthams to be constantly scoring the goals. And then the other elephant in the room is, of course, the situations with James Ward-Prowse and Vestergaard, who are, being linked with moves away from the club at the moment. Should they keep hold of both of them, then obviously Southampton are much stronger. It's been part of the model, in recent years and since they've been back up in the Premier League, to sell players and then bring through that next generation. But there's the worry that when you do, offload too many and you don't quite have those next players who are ready to really step up, it leaves your squad with a bit of an imbalance and potentially in a relegation battle. Just avoiding relegation, I've then gone for Burnley. Now, this prediction is mostly based on the work that Sean Dyche is going to do there over this season, because the transfer business so far has been less than inspiring, really. They brought in a couple players for the future. Obviously, Nathan Collins, I think, will be a good long-term replacement for James Tarkowski, but he's not going to be someone who comes in and immediately improves their starting 11. Should anything happen to Chris Wood, especially from a goal-scoring sense, then Burnley could find themselves a little bit unstuck. But I'm mostly basing this prediction of them surviving on Sean Dyche working his usual magic. I do feel like, with the lack of funds going into that starting 11, that they could be dragged ever closer to the relegation zone, but while Dyche is still there, I think they'll just about get over the line. Next up, and in 16th place, I've then gone for Brentford. I thought I'd throw at least one of the newly promoted sides in there to go ahead and survive, and I've taken a bit of a deeper dive into each of the squads, looked into the style of play from last season as well, and I can't help but feel like Brentford might just end up being the best equipped to adapt to Premier League life when compared to Norwich and Watford, despite Norwich and Watford both finishing on more points last season. Thomas Frank proved that he could be quite adaptable last season as they sort of switched between a 3 at the back and that 4-3-3 system, which has, served them quite well for the last few years now. There may be a little bit of an over-reliance on goals for someone like an Ivan Toney, but I am backing him to be really good in the Premier League this year. And even if I am wrong with this prediction and they do end up being relegated, I think they'll be set up very strongly to then bounce back to the Premier League at the first time of asking. 15th place, I've gone for Newcastle. Now, things may not be entertaining and it's probably going to be maybe a bit of a slug of a season, but I do think that Newcastle will have enough to eventually get over the line. It looks like they're going to get a deal done for Joe Willock, which is massive news for them after how well he did there on loan in the second half of last season. Some of the underlying stats for Newcastle last season under Bruce were really quite poor in terms of touches in the final third, shots in the opposition box and things like that. But once again, I think this is going to be a case of at least like 4 or 5 teams still not quite being up on their level. Next up then, I've gone for Crystal Palace. Now, at the start of the summer, I was a little bit fearful for Palace with all the players they lost. They had a safe pair of hands there in Roy Hodgson, and the new manager coming in, Patrick Vieira, still fairly unknown in the managerial sense. However, I really quite like the recruitment that they've done so far this summer. Mark Guehi and Anderson coming in, I think could be a really solid partnership at the back. Guehi was probably the best centre-half in the Championship last season. He was absolutely unreal for Swansea. Anderson, I thought, had some really good moments for Fulham as well. I'm a fan of Conor Gallagher, who's coming on loan for this season, and Michael Elise is the big one here, and what a steal they got him on, just over 8 million they paid in the end. I know that Eze's missing the first part of the season, but can you imagine that forward 3, Elise, Eze and Wilfred Zaha with maybe Benteke ahead of them? I know that Benteke gets, a bit disrespected in 2021, but last season he actually had a better goals to minute ratio than Ollie Watkins, Aubameyang and Richarlison. So with that added bit of creativity this season coming from Elise, I think Palace will be alright this season, Coming in just above Palace, Brighton fans are going to love this, but I do have Brighton fans in 13th place. Now, their underlying numbers last season were fantastic, and I'm backing them to have a bit more of a steady season this time around and not be quite as involved in the relegation battle that they seemed to be last season. Now, the big thing to talk about with Brighton is obviously the striker situation, with their underlying numbers being very good. It was an underperformance of their XG last season by quite a dramatic amount. I still like Neil Maupay. I still think he's got quite a bit to offer this Brighton side. He scored 18 goals for them in the last 2 seasons, which isn't bad. And it's not that they necessarily need to replace him, it's just that they need a little bit more in that area to sort of support and be that competition alongside alongside him. They've added to their midfield options with Enoch Mapu coming in, and I'm going to back them to have a steady improvement this time around in 13th place. Next up in 12th place, I've then gone for Wolves. Now I could have gone maybe a little bit lower with Wolves, but in the end they worked out at around 12th in my table. Now there does feel like there has been a little bit of a regression in terms of like the ambition of the club since they were first promoted to the Premier League. You know, after those back-to-back 7th finishes, it really felt like they were a club who was on the cusp of something quite special. But then, like I say, since then there just seems to have been a bit more of an acceptance to be sort of happy where they were and to stop pushing on. And obviously when that happens, you start to get a little bit complacent and you ultimately begin to fall a little bit further behind in the league. Now there have been a few changes at the club over the summer. Obviously the big one is Nuno departing. There's been a few incomings and outgoings as well. The big news this season is of course Raul Jimenez coming back from his injury. Should he hit the ground running for Wolves this season, then I think they'll be alright. And Trincao is probably their most exciting acquisition up until this point in the transfer window. I still think they need more in this window, but I think they'll just about be alright. In 11th place, we then have Everton. Bottom half finish would be quite disappointing, but once again, similar to Wolves, there feels like there's been a little bit of a regression. You know, last summer, everything was so positive around the club. Ancelotti was there. The summer recruitment looked really positive. And things started out fairly well before things eventually fizzled out, and obviously Ancelotti has since left the club. Rafa Benitez has come in to an interesting reception, I think it's fair to say, and we're probably more likely to see a little bit more of a pragmatic approach this time around. I do think that Everton still have some very good players who could potentially even shine under Rafa Benitez. You know, if you look at someone like a Calvert-Lewin, who's, you know, maybe in that similar mold to someone like a Rondon, who Benitez worked so well with at Newcastle. Defensively, I think Rafa will get them quite organised. You know, Pickford's just coming off the summer of his life with England at Euro 2020, but for a club who has had those ambitions to break into the top 6, 11th does feel like a bit of a disappointing year. Into the top 10 we go. 10th place, I've then gone for Aston Villa. Now Villa are an intriguing side this season. If you watch my Premier League prediction video from last year, I had them to go down. This time I've flipped the switch on it and I have gone for a top 10 finish for Villa despite losing their best player in Jack Grealish. I do think there's an argument to be made that are Villa a more balanced side now that they've lost Grealish and how they've sort of reinvested that money into the side. Obviously Grealish is one of the best players in the league, I'm not denying that, but I think they've reinvested that money so wisely. Leon Bailey, Emi Buendia and Danny Ings are all going to score a bucket load of goals between them. Added to what is already a good spine of Premier League players, I think that Villa are looking pretty healthy going into this season. You know, they have one of the best goalkeepers in the league in Emi Martinez. Their backline I think is growing as a unit. Probably one of the areas where they still need to look into is midfield. They have been, you know, on and off with that sort of James Ward-Prowse rumour, haven't they? If they do get something over the line in that sense as well, I think Villa will be fairly well set up for this year. Next up, and there's a bit of a fall off from last season, I do have West Ham. Now there is still quite a bit to like about this West Ham side. I particularly enjoyed watching them last season, and I do like how David Moyes, you know, proved a lot of people wrong. You know, myself as a North End fan, I'm always going to have a bit of a soft spot for Moyesy. So far the major addition that they have made into the squad is probably Areola coming in for this season to add a bit more depth into that goalkeeper department. They have some of probably still the most attacking forwards in the league for me in Ben Rama and Jared Bowen. I absolutely love those two. You know, I'm always going to be an advocate of, you know, bringing up and buying people from the EFL and stuff like that, and West Ham have done a good job of that lately. But obviously the big thing is juggling both the league with European competitions. We've seen in the past how that's affected teams, and so that's my only sort of logic with this one and predicting a little bit of a fall off from last time. Coming in 8th place and improving on last season's finish, I'm then going to go for Leeds United. Now this prediction is sort of half based on them still doing a little bit more work in the transfer market, you know, maybe bringing in another midfielder or something like that. But I've just got a good feeling about Leeds, and I don't think they're going to suffer from second season syndrome. I back the project that's going on there. They finished last season in absolutely terrific form. They only lost one of their last 11 Premier League matches. They were a lot more structured and stable at the back towards the end of the season. You know, at the start of the year, everyone sort of pointed towards, oh, you know, Leeds going to be really leaky at the back and stuff like that. But they didn't have their first choice defenders, you know, fit at the time, did they? Once they got that sort of established back line, they looked pretty good at the back. I also also, you know, buy into the argument that players improve with their second season under Bielsa. So someone like a Rodrigo really could explode this season. You know, he ended last season in terrific form. I like the addition of Junior Firpo. I think it's an improvement on Alioski on that left-hand side. And if him and Harrison manage to build up a bit of a relationship, I see a few goals coming from that side. So, yeah, good feeling about Leeds overall. Coming in 7th place, I've then gone for Spurs. Now, this is a little bit of a safe prediction because there's still so many unknowns about Spurs coming into this new season. You know, to make a prediction on them at the moment, I think it's pretty difficult to do without fully knowing what's going to happen with the Kane situation come the end of the window. And I feel like around about 7th is probably where or whereabouts the majority of people would have Spurs placed at this current point in time. Now, obviously, Nuno's coming in. He's going to want to bring his ideas across. And although there is still quality in that squad, it's probably going to take another year or so before they're properly competitive again and really, you know, fighting it out for the top 4. Coming in 6th place, I'm then going to go for Arsenal. Now, by no means has Mikel Arteta turned the ship around at Arsenal. I still think there's quite a few issues with their current squad and heading into next season, which they still need to iron out. However, things do start to be at least turning in the right direction, even if it is going to be a slow process back to where they once were. I think there's more pressure on Arteta this season to deliver results now. You know, last season ultimately ended up being a little bit more of a free hit. This season, I think there is real pressure. They spent over 75 million in this transfer window so far. They could be expected to spend more after that as well. Ben White is obviously the big addition to come into that back line for them. They are half relying on either Aubameyang or Lacazette rediscovering their form, and I'm not sure how likely that is to happen at the moment. But towards the end of last season, we saw a run of results from Arsenal, which I think gave everyone a little bit more hope for them coming into this season, albeit I don't think they'll be anywhere near the top 4. 5th place and just missing out on the top 4, I then have Leicester. I think this will be a pretty popular pick, to be honest with you. I think that the top 4 that I have will be the top 4 that most people are predicting, to be honest with you. The team that is closest to getting in there at the moment is Leicester. I just see these other 4 as having a bit more, really. I like the project that Rodgers is building at Leicester at the moment. Obviously, they're just coming off the back of that fantastic Community Shield win. I think that Iheanacho's importance to this side is only going to go on and grow as the season goes on. We're still waiting to see what's going to be happening with James Maddison as well. One of the rumours that I saw was, you know, potentially Maddison leaving and Lingard coming in as a replacement, which I don't hate. But once again, I think they may just fall short of the top 4. And then for my top 4 order, coming in 4th place, I've gone for Liverpool. Now, to be honest, my 4th to 2nd are all pretty interchangeable, to be honest with you. I'm pretty set on who I think is going to win the league. But these teams that are making up the rest of the top 4, place them in any order and I wouldn't really have too many complaints about it. I don't think there'll be all too much in it between these sides this season. Only reason I've got Liverpool in 4th place is probably because there's still the most question marks over them at the moment. Obviously, we're expecting them to be stronger coming into this season with, you know, Van Dijk getting himself back up to fitness. Although I still want Ben Davies to play a competitive game for Liverpool, but I don't think that's going to happen. This feels like maybe the last chance for this current side to achieve something, and if they don't, then I think there's going to be quite a refresh of this squad heading into next summer. You know, maybe that means a sale of one of those forward 3. But this first team that Klopp's had and really moulded together, you know, and has been unbelievably successful, this feels like it might be winding down now. I could be completely wrong and they could go on and storm the league. We'll wait and see. 3rd place, I've then gone for Manchester United. The biggest unknown for me is still Ollie. You know, his search for a trophy at United still goes on. I respect the job that he was brought in to do, and I sort of get that now. Brought harmony to this group. He's got them at a point now where they're ready to challenge. But is he that right man to challenge with them? We'll wait and see this season. Because the recruitment has been positive. You know, they might still be missing a midfielder or 2, but the additions of Varane and Sancho should make Man United competitive at least. 2nd place, I've then gone for Chelsea. Squad depth here, I think, is an absolutely massive one. Full season under Tuchel, who really got them organised and set up last season. And I think they could be worthy title challenges, you know, with the introduction of Lukaku especially. The options they have to play off him are pretty exciting, you have to say. I expect Chelsea to be strong at the back once again this season. They got a really tough start on paper, but if they manage to get through that first month of games with a decent point return, then they could be there or thereabouts. But coming in and winning the league, it's the boring answer, but it's probably going to be Man City again, isn't it? In terms of squad depth, in terms of the manager, in terms of the transfer window that they've had already and that they could still have with the potential arrival of Harry Kane as well. There's a relentlessness to this Manchester City side where I don't think that complacency is going to seep in. I think most people recognise them as the strongest team in the league. But guys, there you have it. As you can see to the side of me, those are my Premier League predictions for the upcoming season. We'll revisit this video at the end of the season and see how right or probably how wrong I was with most of these calls. I want to hear from you guys though, and I want you guys to be putting your neck on the line. Leave in the comments down below what are your predictions for the upcoming season. I'm especially interested to know your predictions for the top 4 and bottom 3. But apart from that guys, that will wrap it up for today's video. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. But apart from that, thanks for watching and I'll see you all in the next one.